Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to the Conquering Your Clownfish podcast. So excited for our special guest today. Please allow me to introduce Rebekah. Rebekah is a wife, mom, podcaster, author, and disability advocate. She is the proud author of Building a Resilient Life and a podcast host of Rhythms for Life. Rebekah resides in Tennessee with her husband, Gabe, and their 4 children, Cade, Pierce, Kennedy, and Joy. Her eldest son, Cade, was diagnosed with Down syndrome 6 hours after birth, and this transformed her life and eventually led them to adopt their youngest child, Joy, who also was born with Down syndrome. Yes, please welcome to the show, Rebekah Lyons. Great to have you here, Rebekah.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be with you.
Yep, very good. So thank you for taking some time. This is something that I've actually been looking forward to for some time. There's so much of the work that you do alongside your husband with Gabe that just resonates so well with Andrea and I. And plus the fact that we are both entrusted with an extra chromosome or two in our family makes a lot of sense for us to be able to get together. So thank you. Allow me to please get started. I look at the experience, obviously, that you had with Cade and how you described that in the sense that that transformed your life. Would you be open to sharing with us a little bit about that experience and how that has transformed your life? Now, and Cade is 23 now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So share with us, if you could, go back to the inception and share with us a little bit in relation to that transformation that has transpired.
Yeah, we'd been married 3 years, and I remember feeling great most of the pregnancy. And then at 39 weeks, just went in asking for a final epidural ultrasound because I felt like my stomach was getting a little smaller and my face was swelling. And so they did one right at the end and realized all my fluid had leaked very slow over the last trimester. And he was only 4.5 pounds full term. And
wow.
They said he was in a failure to thrive state and you're having this baby today. And so it wound up turning into an emergency C-section to get him out with 2 epidurals that created a high block and kind of went up into my lungs. It was a very scary, traumatic first day of motherhood. I guess I was already a mom before that. But as far as like birthing him, and so we were just fighting for his life. He went on feeding tube and respirator and whisked to the urgent care or the ICU. The NICU, and I was, trying to breathe oxygen because my lungs were a little bit compromised from all the anesthesia. So that was my entree to motherhood. And 6 hours later, the doctor came in and said, "We see signs of Down syndrome in your baby." And I was still so full of medication that I just kind of looked at him and looked at Gabe, and we kind of literally laid back down and fell asleep. Weren't even at the moment ready to process or even knew what to do with that. So the next day, I'm still in a wheelchair, can't walk or stand yet. Wheeled to the NICU on the next floor and hold him for the first time and just see that I couldn't even really hold him. I got to put my hands in the little, that incubator, whatever you call him. I'm sorry. I don't know all the words now. And he was so sweet and perfect and tiny. And, they did the testing. We wouldn't have it confirmed for 6 days. And I remember getting that final diagnosis 6 days later and just kind of collapsing on the floor and knowing that's probably where it would go, but just also feeling like I don't know what to do. I'm a kid myself at 26, but I don't even know how to be a mom, but especially how to be his mom. And I just remember feeling the comfort of God even in that moment, like you might not know what to do, but I'm going to show you what to do and you can trust me. And so God just got really loud for me that first year. For sure, I'd grown up in the church and grown up as a believer, a Christian. But this was a new kind of dependence and a new kind of trust. And that was really a beautiful year, hard year, lots of tears, lots of fighting for his life in that he didn't latch on for 9 weeks. And I just had to pump and pray and hope one day he would. He finally did about 10 weeks in, and got to be the fattest baby you've ever seen, which was my only goal in life. And finally weaned him at 13 months. He had a little bit more of a developmental delay even in some of his peers because his oxygen to his brain was so reduced during those final days. He walked around 3 years. He still wouldn't be cognitively as maybe advanced as some kiddos with Down syndrome, limited verbally, but yet I'm so glad that I didn't know then how to even measure what success looked like, because it was more like Cade is Cade and we'll learn as we go. And
Yep.
and that's been like with every kid. I mean, nobody asks your typical kid how many languages will they speak, and what will their GPA be in 4th grade, or what sports team are they going to play for? Nobody asks an able-bodied a typical family, a newborn. And I don't know why people feel the need to do that with special needs, but it's their way of trying to make sense of what you're going to be up against. And I don't
Yep.
think we're really supposed to think like that. I think we're supposed to be very present in the moment that's in front of us. And Cade was really good for that. He taught me how to not measure achievement at all, and not see milestones as credible or valuable, but more just helping me understand more what Cade needed to give him the most independent life that he could have with dependence. And I think that's really what we want all our kids to have. We want them to be launched into the world, but we also don't want them to be self-reliant. We want them to be dependent on God and their siblings and their family and their loved ones, because we are all people with limits. And it's such a beautiful thing when we can show our weaknesses. And what that ultimately cultivates in relationship is an interdependency, relationships of reciprocity. I mean, he's given us so much as a family in his valuing the things that really matter: presence, attunement, joyfulness, embrace, fun. And while he might have more physical limitations or cognitive limitations compared to what his siblings might look like, he does not have the emotional setbacks that they do. And
Right.
And so I think there's a grace in it all, and it allows us to meet each other there and round each other out. It's really beautiful.
That's a beautiful description of Cade. What a wonderful blessing he is to your family, and probably to a lot more than just your family. I look at that and I see with, my boys, similar situation. In fact, I remember in Nash's diagnosis after he was born, one of the most common questions that I would get from well-meaning individuals, families, friends, would be, how bad does he have it? How bad is it? It's like, what's unique about it though is, you reference, Nash maybe won't ever graduate from a college level math class, and maybe he's probably not going to drive, but you know what? Where it really matters, where our divine worth really matters in the sense of embodying joy and light, embodying happiness, he excels better than anybody that I know. And how much better of a blessing could that be for a family than that? And that's what I thought of as you were describing Cade.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely. And this isn't to paint a picture, because I know sometimes people feel like people with kids with Down syndrome act like they're perfect and they don't have a defiant streak or sin nature. I'm like, oh, no. Cade and Joy are they crack me up. They're just a little less covert in how they show it. And it does help us lighten up. What I love about Cade and Joy, we've adopted Joy since she was 5 when we got her. She was, I don't like to say abandoned, but placed at a police station at 4 months, hopeful that she would find refuge or shelter. And so she was taken to an orphanage right then. And she was in an orphanage in and out for 5.5 years till we got her. And she, was still taking bottles, wearing diapers in a room with 18 cribs the day we met her. And within a couple of days, she had potty trained herself, number 1, and 2, stopped the bottles and stopped the crib. And it was she was ready. She just needed shown, oh, I didn't know I didn't have to do this. And she's definitely every bit her name. But I kind of laugh now that she's home. She's 10, he's 23, and our other two are off to college. So we're empty nesting as we know it. And they want to do fun stuff all the time. And I think about that. I'm like, don't we all? But we can't always just do fun stuff. Like we have responsibilities and things like that. And sometimes I'm a little jealous. I'm like, you guys have responsibilities too. Okay. Like you need to make your bed. You need to clear the table, set the table. Joy loves doing the dishes, so I'm taking full advantage of that. I'm like, she must not be blood. She's the only child in my home that loves to do the dishes. But just how much I watch them being with confidence when they're contributing. And then I also kind of like, and that's the same for my typical kids, right? Like everyone needs to have responsibility so that they can feel confident, that they grow in confident. You raise confident kids by giving them responsibilities and helping them learn how to figure things out on their own or do things on their own. Even if it's not the way you would do it, you just let it go. Like often Joy will dress herself in her PJs and they are backwards and inside out. And I'm like, it's great. You're just going to bed. You did it. For school, sometimes I'll lay them out in the way they should go and she still puts them on and we get it there. But it's fun to see that. And then, but there is this side of it that I don't know people always talk about with special needs, where if they really want something and you say no, they will start to tear up as if they've been hurt. And
Yep.
I'm like, you're not hurt at all. This is like your whole little game to go like, no, I don't want to turn off this TV show or I don't want to go to bed right now. I'm going to start to tear up as if you just offended and hurt my feelings so that you will feel bad that you're actually trying to parent me. And so I will sometimes go like, you're okay. Nothing harmful is happening right now. You just don't like what's going on. And sometimes they're like, no, we're not going to cry about the fact that you had to turn the TV off. I'm sorry. This is not going to happen. But then the funny piece is they'll come back in and they'll go, sorry. No, but I don't know if you've seen this. Sorry.
100%.
And then you go, thank you. It's okay. And then they go, TV show or like whatever the show is. They know the minute they say sorry,
Very smart.
they can re-ask for the thing that you had already said no to. I'm talking masters of manipulation right there. So I just want to make sure we're fully disclosing. They're just a little less, they're a little more obvious. Like, I think they're just like all of us. Like, they want what they want and they're going to be nice until you give it to them. And if you're not nice, they're going to get really mad and stubborn, either to cry or be really stubborn. But it is good to kind of see it just at that level. I'm going, aren't we all like this?
Yeah.
When we don't get what we want, we pitch a little bit of a fit or we try another way to get what we want, even through a fake apology. And it's just, I think it's just really sweet to kind of go, all right, like this is how we approach God, a lot of times, and kind of mad at him and then like trying to negotiate and I don't know.
Say we're sorry.
Yeah.
And then come right
Say
back,
we're
right?
sorry and then just go do it right over again. But we have a lot to learn from Kate and Joy for sure.
Yeah, we do. You have 2 books out that are amazing. So one is Building a Resilient Life. And the subtitle of that, which I love, is How Adversity Awakens Strength, Hope, and Meaning. The other is Rhythms of Renewal. Subtitle of this is Trading Stress and Anxiety for a Life of Peace and Purpose. Much of the work that you're doing alongside Gabe is for couples and for empowering couples to be able to overcome this. I wanted to ask, with these principles, how have you been able to apply these in raising your children? And more importantly, your children entrusted with a disability, if you'd be open to sharing that.
Yeah. Well, we know that adversity awakens, and it's more about what is it awakening? Is it awakening defeat and discouragement and despair? Is it awakening the human heart, which is actually wired to overcome? We're stronger than we think. We're more able-bodied. And it's just like our kids, our typical kids or Kate and Joy. We don't always like the push to do hard things, but when we do the hard thing, we are filled with a sense of accomplishment and gratitude and confidence. And I have found that in my own life where, whether it's building resilience or creating rhythms of resilience, it just means that there's going to be everyday kind of hard things, just trials of transitions, getting people out the door, getting through the school minutia of paperwork and filing, or advocating through your IEPs, or making
Yep.
sure your kids are recognized and known by their peers. And there's a lot of that. And then there's like the big stuff too that kind of feel like curveballs, like life curveballs that are in different kind of adversity, greater challenges, struggles with health, diagnosis, whatever. And we had walked through that with Cade in 2020. He really had mentally a hard time with COVID, like so many kids did that don't really function well on Zoom. And that's
Yep.
not a real means of social life. So we walked through something very hard with him. His window of tolerance was greatly reduced. He was locking down, and it was probably the hardest year of his life. And through family counselors and some forms of medication that was regulated, and now he's gotten off of all of that and he's back into himself. But it did take a good couple years of just a lot of surrender and defiance, resistance, inability to verbalize what he was internally feeling. And so I think I would just say to like the parent and to the siblings of these kids and to the kids themselves, like give yourself grace through those extenuating seasons that where the circumstances are a little bit more loud and the trial is a little more weighted. We know you're going to always have some form of a different road that you're walking, but there will be some seasons that are distinctly harder. And so what I learned and my husband learned is we found we were bickering on how to navigate the stress that was just went from here to here. Like it just rose in that season. Our kids were bickering. They started to not like Cade, or one person's like, I hate Cade. And the other kid's like, you don't mean that. And of course he doesn't mean that, but everyone's speaking out of emotional outbursts because the whole thing was a big outburst for 2 years. And looking back, I'm like, okay, God, you were with us through the whole thing. There were moments where we were like, I can't keep going, but you knew what you were doing. And you were all teaching us new ways to love and connect with Cade. And you were also showing us places where we need to go, Cade, this is what we're doing. You know, sometimes we can let those kiddos be the center of the home and the family, and they're not. They are part of the family. The world does not revolve around them any more than it revolves around me or my husband or our other children. And so I think it's really good to have a teamwork approach as a family, that one child who might be able-bodied is getting ignored because the other child is so demanding. It does require both parents to have these almost like huddles through like quarterbacking every season of that, going like, let's make sure, are we depriving each other? Are we depriving other kiddos? Are we just like letting it be let the day be the day and move forward and like let some things go? And what are the things we need to double down on? And as long as there's agreement in the marriage that we're on the same team and we're doing the best we can and give grace for the season as it is, knowing that at some point there is a shift of some sort and there will be lighter days and there will be lighter seasons, and you'll look back and be grateful that you weathered that storm with faith, with one another, and you leaned in even more to each other in that process.
It's a beautiful explanation. You know, when we receive diagnosis, many times it comes prenatal diagnosis for us as well as for you. It came after our child was born. You immediately go into a survival mode, if you may. And it's a unique place because it is much easier to turn to your spouse, to turn to God. You have tremendous help and support that comes from the outside with family, friends, community, etc. And that's how you weather that storm. What's unique about this, though, as you use the example with Cade that you just went through, that's something that is unseen. And it's not something that is necessarily prepared for. You have sunshine and rainbow period of time, especially oftentimes while kids are in secondary education and they tribe, have a community. And then obviously for Cade, he's transitioning out of that, and then the world shuts down. And so that is a bad combination, as you probably have experienced. But that's a beautiful explanation of how to weather that storm, how to survive survival mode when faced into that case, when there isn't maybe as much support from the outside and you truly have to look internally to a spouse, to children, and to God. So thank you for your example. So I'm a huge adoption advocate, and this platform is actually not so much about adoption. I have a whole nother podcast where it's exclusively about adoption, but I can't help myself. You answered the call to adopt Joy. And the story about how that came about with her name in particular is incredible. Would you be open to sharing that, as well as share with us a little bit about how you came to your adoption journey, and in particular, a disability adoption journey?
Yes. So when Cade was born, that day was traumatic. And then I had a C-section for Pierce and then another for Kennedy, our third. They were every 2 years. So I couldn't have more children after that. And they tied my tubes while I was in the middle of my C-section with Kennedy. I was only 31. So I had a lot of feelings about that but there was too much scar tissue, and my OB was like, I'm not going to. This is what I recommend. This is the best way to do this. Well, we still kind of wanted a bigger family and just didn't know how to navigate that. And again, I would probably change some things in my 20s if I were doing it over, but I just think you're doing the best you can with what you know when you make those decisions, and the Lord is there. All that to say, we just knew we'd leave the door open for adoption on the other side of all this. And it would come up every few years for about 3 minutes. And it was something like, could we, should we, maybe, no, I think we're good. But it would keep surfacing, and it was a tender spot for both of us, my husband and I. And we lived in New York City for 5 years. Didn't see any way possible for us to adopt and live there. We were sharing, 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Manhattan. And the 3 kids were lined up like the 3 bears in the master bedroom. So we're like, this is off the table. We moved to Nashville 10 years ago, and our church is always talking about foster care and adoption. And we're like, okay, this is not coincidental. This is still there. But we just didn't know how to do it, because foster care, you need to be available at any given moment for any child to enter your home. And my job at that point was traveling and speaking on the books I was writing that were 2 events that were contracted a year prior. So you can't just decide like, I'm not going to go now. I know you have, several hundred people at this event. I'm not going to show because we got placed, so it was just going on. What is the best for this family, our home? And adoption was still kind of up there. But we knew that if we adopted, our daughter had started praying that we would adopt a baby sister or a little sister. She never specified special needs. She just kept saying a sister. She wanted a sister. She wrote up the prayers in her closet. And we're like, maybe that's for you when you become a mom. We just were like, not really sure we were ready, even though we had entertained it. We were not serious about it. And then finally, there was a day I just remember telling the Lord, if you want this to happen, I need you to put it right here. And I mean, like right in front of my face, and I'll name her Joy. And it was just came from Psalm 126, those who sow in tears, bearing a seed, reap a harvest with songs of joy, carrying the sheaves with them. And this idea of like walking through 7 years of anxiety and depression throughout some of my time in New York City, I just remember though in those tears going, I want songs of joy. I want a harvest of joy, knowing that none of those tears were wasted, that God saw every one of them, that he marked every one of them, that there was intention with that sacred grief. And maybe even the tears I cried over Cade, right? Like none of those were wasted. And all that to say, 3 years later, I get a text of a photo of a little girl with Down syndrome at a foster home in Beijing run by a friend of mine who said her file's going to the States tomorrow and just wanted you to know. And she knew that like we loved kiddos and, we thought they were so cute, but I was just like, I don't know why she's kind of writing to me as if like we've been waiting for this. Cause I just didn't really put that out there to anybody because we weren't waiting. We were kind of like, if you want this to happen, you make it happen, but we're going to keep kind of living life. But for whatever reason she did. And I said, she's adorable. What's her name? And she said, Cara, Chara. And I said, oh, you mean the Greek word for joy. And that was what was so powerful because she said that Joy had arrived to her orphanage from the orphanage on a train, an overnight train, 12-hour train ride with an infant that had a heart defect. Joy did not. And this foster home was specifically for kiddos who needed heart surgery. So Joy wasn't even supposed to arrive or be there. But the orphanage had sent her with this baby because they thought she had a strong chance of being adopted. And so orphanage had created a file, which is super rare in China, for her, advocated for her, and then put her on a train to this girl who ran this foster home who had a high record of placing kids that came to her. Like all her, all her kids would either get placed in homes or they wouldn't make it, right? Like there was no middle ground. They didn't just hang out. She made sure she advocated where they needed to be. And so she brought her in and she said when she saw Joy in the middle of the night, when she arrived, her face was forlorn and sad. And for whatever reason, she just saw something in her that was not obvious to like first impression. And she just renamed her. And she named her Cara 6 months before we ever even knew about her. And I thought that was so kind of God to go, not only will you name her Joy, I will rename her before you even know her. And I think I think that's just what God does. He's like, maybe I gave you Kate so that when Joy came along that you weren't really even looking for with the ultimatum that you set up, that you would say yes. And I think that's kind of really, because we didn't set out initially to like getting that diagnosis the first time around was hard. Obviously, it's hard for everybody. You just don't see it coming and you don't know exactly what to do with it. But to kind of get into it and realize, oh, we know what to do with it. Not that we know what to do with it. We're not scared of it. And then almost opens you up to go, we could actually choose this. And yet, even in that, I think God chose it. He still even chose it for us and just put it right in front of us. And that's when you kind of can't run from those things. You just can't walk away. And I remember being so scared because it was so sudden. And they were like, she's ready. She can be yours. Like this week, you can have her file. There was 2 people in front of us, but they didn't qualify for some reason based on the age of their kids. And so within like 4 days of seeing her for the first time, they're like, we are sending you her file to consider what your answer is. And we hadn't even done a home study or anything. And we had the whole month of December to pray through it. And I just remember towards the end being like, we can't do this and we can't not do this. It just was like, wow, it felt, we were 20 years, our 20-year anniversary. We were mid-40s, she's only 5. We have no idea of her history or her medical background or anything, but here we are. And I think those are just the sweet little nods of God just to go like, do you trust me? Do you trust me? Right. I'm not going to actually give you any answers, just that I'm going to be with you and I'm going to walk you through it. And I think if we just kind of took that open-handed thing in life a lot, like we would have a closer walk with God for sure. And we would actually see fruit of things that we would have maybe not seen had we tried to do everything planned out in our own strength. And I think adoption is a great example of that. It's hard for so many families that do adopt. I know there are hard things. And then there are also these beautiful resurrection, redemptive stories that I'm walking with a lot of my friends who have adopted. They're so powerful. And let's just be honest, being a parent, no matter what your kid's story is, whether they came through your womb or somebody else's, where they came with abilities or different abilities, all of it's hard. All of it's hard. Right. And if we just kind of own that and then go, who are the marginalized who might just not have somebody looking for that? It's going to be hard no matter who it is. But what about the ones that are kind of being overlooked or abandoned or set to the side? Then let's go after them.
No doubt. I like to describe adoption as the most beautiful hard I have ever experienced in my life. And I think what you just described resonates very well with that. So thank you, Rebekah, for sharing that. This has been a very special episode. And thank you for sharing your light, sharing your joy, and no pun intended, so much gratitude and expression of love for what the work is that you're doing and the ministry that you're bringing to so many wonderful people. We will include your website, the books, your social media on all of the show notes. I would highly encourage our listeners to look up Rebekah and engage with the amazing content that she is creating. So thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.